Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erich Kurschat. I'm the owner of Harmony Insights, LLC, and the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of real HR pros solving real HR problems. You have joined us today for a Harmony Insights lunch date, something that I've been doing for a few weeks now to remain inspired by colleagues, friends, people in various circles of mine that I find to be inspiring, that have been good conversationalists in the past, and that I want to keep close by for one reason or another. Primarily, again, for that inspiration to do my best work and to believe that anything is possible in some ways, and to go about my afternoon ready to tackle stuff that, honestly, given how some of my mornings start, I'm not really excited to tackle. But then I have a good conversation for 30 minutes with one of my friends and things turn around. Today's special guest for our Harmony Insights lunch date comes to us from Lucas James Talent Partners, and that is their, I have your title written down so I don't mess it up, Director of Business Development, Brandon Murphy. So Brandon, welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date.
Thanks, Eric. I thank you so much for asking me to do this and inviting myself. I'm humbled, excited. I think we're going to have a lot of fun, and I just can't tell you how appreciative I am of the opportunity to chat with you today.
Last thing I want to mention before we get to Brandon, our star of the afternoon, is I hope you're all doing well. I considered not doing this today, not having this conversation, given everything that's going on, everything that went on over the weekend with the protests. There's just a lot happening. When we thought that there was a lot happening related to COVID-19, I think we had no idea of what was to come. And there's a lot of really good conversation happening right now around the protests that are taking place in Chicago and around the country, and some other things related to that. And I wasn't sure that this conversation was going to be appropriate. And I gave it some thought. And I thought at first, out of respect to our special guest today, Brandon, and to all of you, I thought it was necessary to keep it on the calendar, to have it, because you've planned on it and you've shown up for it. And I think that says a lot to me in terms of what people are needing right now. And then second, I've decided that this is one way that I can contribute to the conversation. I'm not going to profess that I'm a subject matter expert in race relations, diversity and inclusion, a lot of what is being discussed these days. But I care very much about connecting people meaningfully and facilitating productive conversation. And I think that is an important way to contribute to what is going on now. And if that's where I can start while I'm still fumbling with my words to figure out how to address some of the other things that are taking place, I very much want to start here. So this isn't about me, certainly, but I just wanted to say that right off the bat for any of you who were wondering perhaps what the thought process was behind moving forward with today's lunch date. It is important that we have this conversation and that it goes in whatever direction that we as a community deem is most valuable. And I'm very grateful, Brandon, to you for being willing to have it with me and with us and to go forward as planned today.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Let's get started by having you introduce yourself. I would do it, but I imagine you're going to do it much better. Let me just frame it up this way. So when I came to you and said, Brandon, I would love to feature you as a guest on one of my lunch dates. I want you to choose the topic. You've decided to call this, oh, now suddenly I don't have the name of our conversation, but I know it has to do with giving first. That is your topic. Mm-hmm. What positions you specifically well for, or especially well for this conversation, given the work that you do, the company that you work for, and kind of what drives you as a business professional?
Great question. And again, thank you for the platform. So myself as a business professional and doing what we do, it's completely centered around relationships and making meaningful connections and relationships with other individuals or business owners. And the reason that I felt passionate about this topic and speaking with you about it today, oh wow, look, right on cue, here's a delivery. The doorbell's gonna ring and we're gonna get the dog to bark.
We'll run with it. It's all good. It's part of what working from home is these days.
Okay, she's done. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Wow, that's amazing. Well, so the reason I felt so compelled and passionate about this is because during all the adversity that we faced so far through 2020, and now even today, that seems like an understatement. Um, it's caused me to change my behaviors as a person, as a business professional, as a friend, and it's taught me a lot. And what it's afforded me is a greater sense of fulfillment in what I do on a daily basis and how I engage with others and interact. To give everybody a little bit of background, and if my connection is unstable, I apologize. Little background, we are a contract recruiting and sourcing firm for companies. So we assist organizations in finding talent. And a big part of that is dealing with people. I would venture to say the majority of that is dealing with people. And prior to COVID-19, quarantine, the situation at hand, our small business, which is less than 2 years old, had experienced tremendous growth. We had experienced, I don't want to say easy success, but just by the nature of the economic situation and what we did, we grew very rapidly and quickly. Just doing the normal things, going through meetings and talking and having service level conversations with people, and etc. Enter COVID-19, enter economic recession, and everything spiraling downhill at a record pace, seemingly within 14 days. Our heads were spinning a little bit, very, very much as everyone else's heads were spinning. We were significantly impacted as a business. We lost quite a bit of revenue and clients, and we were left trying to answer the question, what do we do from here? Where do we go? And you really have a couple of options. You don't have that many. You can either sit tight, put your head in the sand and hope for the best, or you can pivot yourself. You can rebrand yourself. You can change how you're doing things. So brainstorming as an individual and then collectively with leadership at Lucas James, we had to answer the question, how can we provide value to anyone right now? Especially doing what we do, where we're outsourced hiring and recruiting services, right? If companies aren't hiring, how are we relevant? What can we do? And the answer we came up with was, we can just be good people. That's really it. We can be givers. We can be generous with our time. We can be generous with our networks. We can be generous with our relationships, lending a listening ear, giving perspective, helping others, whether that's an individual, a business, making meaningful, beneficial introductions for people or businesses. That's what we decided to do. Because what else did we have to do, right? And if we have an opportunity to make an impact in any way, we needed to do it. So we went all in on that. And prior to COVID-19, we did a little of that, but we really weren't giving first. We were, hustling as a business and trying to get in front of folks and have meaningful conversations, but that's what we were doing. We weren't focusing on the relationship piece of things. And what I found on a personal level and professional level, especially over the last, I think it's 11 weeks, I have felt more fulfilled personally and professionally now than I have in my entire 14-year career, doing what I'm doing. I'm having fantastic conversations, albeit virtually, with individuals. I'm creating long-lasting relationships during this time of crisis. I'm having deep, meaningful conversations with people during this time of crisis, and I'm able to help. And what I found is that, I may not be able to make a direct introduction that results in somebody getting a new opportunity or results in two organizations partnering with one another. But the simple act and gesture of me being willing to do that for another person and spending the time and the energy and the effort to do it enables me to go to bed at night feeling great about how I spent my time today, feeling really good about it.
So I appreciate that, and I think that's a great introduction and a great setup to this. I'm listening to you speak. I'm thinking about the number of lunch dates that I've had recently with people who have volunteered topics around meaningful connection. And that's something that I think that's important about the lunch dates that I'm doing, is that I'm going out and I am choosing the guests and they are choosing their topics so that I can ensure that whatever they show up with, they are passionate about. They don't need a stack of notes. They don't need, a script to go along with it. They are passionate about whatever the topic is that they've chosen. And time again, people are bringing some version of meaningful connection, which I will then broaden to include intentional service, which we're talking about today. And particularly, I think, interested in the fact that this wasn't just a business decision, but the way you've presented it to me prior to today and sort of in your introduction as well, but that it was a very personal evolution as well. That, not to say you weren't service oriented previously, but as a person, independent of Lucas James Talent Partners, this has been so impactful for you and so eye-opening and insightful in terms of how you are engaging with others. So I want to make sure that we talk about that through the lens of the challenges that we are facing today specifically. So each of these conversations start by identifying the challenges that we feel our attendees and those who end up listening to this, eventually the recording, are faced with. From your perspective, what do you think some of those challenges are? And I would invite others who are listening in to include the challenges in the chat area that they see related to our ability or even willingness to give intentionally, to be first and foremost of service to other people. What are some of the challenges that you see around that these days?
Well, I can speak to myself personally. It's hard to speak for others. But the mental shift was the most difficult for me. And making that leap to say, you know what, it's not about Brandon anymore. It's not about what am I going to get out of this anymore. That's a burden that I don't need to carry. It's a burden I don't need to carry anymore. It takes too much time and energy and thought. What it needs to be about is how I can make a positive impact for a business or someone else, feel good about it, and know that I've done the right thing, and that the universe, in a lot of cases, is just, many unjust, but in a lot of cases is just, and that good things will come from it. And they may not be directly correlated to something good for Brandon or Lucas James, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay.
So it sounds like the first, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. No.
It sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, then the first challenge is thinking beyond ourselves and putting our needs aside. And there are going to be some people on our conversation there with us today that are needing clients, some that are needing meaningful employment, that are in job transition. And I think the same goes for networking. When we find ourselves in a networking situation or conversation, we show up knowing so clearly what our own needs are. I need business, I need work, and that drives how we communicate with other people and the relationships that we build and our first impressions and all of that. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like that is one of our first hurdles to get past, is moving beyond what do I need and how can I get my needs fulfilled. 100%.
Yes. That was the biggest hurdle for myself, is getting over myself. I've been in sales my entire career. Sales is very ego driven. Sales is very performance driven, motivated by name and lights, you name it. You've all heard the cliches. And so it's almost ingrained in you, from the start of your career, and trying to deprogram that from my personality and my character to then be focused outwardly on others was a challenge. It was a shift, and it did not come overnight. It was a process, but I tell you what, I can almost remember the moment it clicked, when it just felt natural. It felt right. I wasn't going into it was a virtual meeting, but I wasn't going into a meeting thinking about how am I going to get my message across? How am I going to get my needs and my pitch out there? How am I going to I didn't go in that way. I went in thinking, I cannot wait to hear about this person. I can't wait to ask them about themselves. I can't wait to see what their needs are and what their concerns are, what's keeping them up at night, how I can be of service, how I can help. And it was one of the most intriguing, rewarding conversations and meetings I had had in months. It was free flowing. It was genuine. It was much deeper than the surface level conversations I had been having. And it meant something. And I felt truly connected to that individual. And that's when it clicked for me that it can't just be about what is in it for Brandon anymore. That's not going to fly. You know, we're not going to achieve what we want to achieve when I'm only looking out for ourselves or our mission. It needs to be about others and how we can help them achieve their goals, remove a problem, open the door, and things that on our end will take care of themselves.
Yeah. So it sounds like your own personal transformation, if we can call it that. I don't know if that sounds too extreme, but
Sure. No,
evolution,
it's
we'll say.
accurate.
Yeah. Was inspired in a way by a professional evolution, right? I was going to ask what came first, the chicken or the egg in this case. The way you've
Yeah.
articulated the story, it sounds like it was at first a business conversation to say, what do we need to do differently? And then through that conversation, you, Brandon Murphy, then realized that this was also a personal evolution. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely fair to say. Yeah, absolutely fair to say. I've taken those things and applied it on my personal life, you know, and it's just communication improves. You know, things are more transparent. It's just a better way to do things, and it's, you know, it's forever changed how I approach, you know, myself personally and professionally.
Well, you are already getting accolades from one of our attendees today. Stephen says that he knows you as somebody who gives first and has been very helpful to him, which is great to see. Thank you, Stephen, for that.
Thanks,
Stephen
Stephen.
also
Thank you.
Stephen also, and I should say, I think the two of you probably know each other through the HR Hot Seat community. I'm grateful to both of you, certainly, for being a part of that. Stephen has added something that I would like to pick up on as a second challenge. We talked about the first being able to move beyond ourselves, and you may have others in mind to share. Stephen is suggesting a challenge in terms of being able to give first is wondering what you have to give. In part, I'm not going to put words in Stephen's mouth, but in part that could have to do with our first challenge of being so clear on what we need, that we spend less time considering what we have to give others, our gift to other people. I think especially when you are in job transition or maybe even newer to the marketplace, you're thinking, well, I certainly don't have the experience or the expertise. You know, I may not have other resources in terms of finances or time. What do I have to give to others? Would you agree with Stephen that that is a challenge that we face as well when it comes to giving first?
I would absolutely agree. And, you know, we wanted to talk about and leave this conversation with, you know, what can I give, you know, or what can I take away from this and apply out there? And this is a great transition. And Stephen, thank you for the kind words. And what I would say to you is you have a ton to give. You write great content for LinkedIn. You've got fantastic ideas, you know, but outside of those things, you have, you know, your time you can give. You have the ability to listen to someone. You have perspective that others do not. You've got knowledge that others do not. You know, you can give your attention to someone. All those things are very valuable to a number of different people for a variety of different reasons. And so I think keeping in mind that any conversation you have someone, if you can keep the focus on them and better understand their needs, that's giving. That's giving. And I've found, even in situations where I'm meeting someone for the first time and I maybe don't really know what I can offer going into the conversation, I don't think I ever leave a conversation without a takeaway that I can help with. And it may not be super impactful. It may not be earth-shattering to that individual, but it's kind, it's a gesture, and you know, they know that I really listened and want to help. And I think that's something that if you can get there mentally, you'll find that you have a lot to give folks that'll make a meaningful impact for them.
Thank you for that, and for your contribution, Stephen. That's a great point. An anecdote of my own, and I shared this on a recent lunch date, when people were connecting with me on LinkedIn, wanting so badly to be of service to them. I said what I've seen a lot of other people say. I would say, how can I help you? How can I be of service? That's just that became my mantra a while ago. And I thought, well, that's the best thing for me to ask. What I learned very quickly on LinkedIn and other places is when people don't yet know you, they have a hard time answering that question. So it was almost unfair of me to ask. No matter how badly I wanted to give and be of service, for me to say, how can I be of service to you, was unfair, or at the least unproductive, because they didn't yet understand how to answer that question. So keeping my focus on wanting a meaningful connection that I thought could evolve to me being able to be of service and giving at some point, I started to instead ask on LinkedIn when people would connect with me, why have you chosen to connect with me specifically? If you can give me some sense of your motivation, what's your motivation for connecting? Simple as that. If I have some sense of what your motivation is, now I can start to put the pieces together. Honestly, I saw that you're visible in the HR space and I'm looking for an HR job. Great. That's fantastic. Like, that's a little bit of information that I didn't have before that allows us to start with meaningful connection and allow me to then move around to what I can do for somebody. But if I expected right off the bat to be able to be of service and to give and ask somebody, how can I do that for you? People aren't always able to answer that question. So that was a challenge that I specifically faced around attempting to be of service to other people first. Um, so we've already kind of transitioned into this conversation about what we can do with the challenges that we perceive we face. Sometimes we really do face them. Sometimes they're just perceived challenges. Brandon, what are some other things that you have done specifically that have allowed you to transition to this different mindset, adopt it maybe in the beginning before you really understood what it looked like, and begin to prioritize being of service and giving in the way that you've articulated here?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost is making the decision that I'm going to be relationship focused completely with any individual I come across. That can be a personal acquaintance. That can be somebody in my personal life. That can be somebody from business. It could be a partner to our firm. It could be a client partner, a potential. It doesn't matter. An individual is an individual, and they're valuable in their own right. And I want to go deep with the relationship. Doesn't always work, it doesn't always work out, doesn't always make sense. You're not going to get along with everybody. I think we all know that. We're all adults. But if you give your genuine self to somebody and you really care about an outcome, or at least about learning more about them, I feel that it's not hard to make a really meaningful connection. And those meaningful connections can take many different shapes and forms. So being relationship centric, going out of my way to check in on people, especially during this time. I'm definitely not pinging people every 48 hours, but if a few weeks go by, I want to chat and being genuine in my curiosity on how somebody's doing, and what's new, what's happened. It changes the conversation, and there's probably a new way that I could help. So yeah, I would say making the mental shift of giving first, not worrying about myself, and then making a conscious effort to be so focused on making sure that relationship succeeds and is mutually beneficial to that other person, collectively has impacted everyone involved.
And I like some of the recommendations too, because I think it'd be so easy, as sort of Stephen implied, that, what do I have to give somebody else in terms of something tangible? And I love how you're sort of, or at least I'm inferring from what you've said, that sometimes the most value comes in the time that you make available, the attention that you give, just is listening actively to them, asking, how are you? And not in the sort of, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? Good. Let's go about our day.
Right.
But like, really, how are you? How are you feeling? With no expectation of reciprocity, or compensation or anything like that. And that gift of time, especially now when I think so many people probably are feeling all kinds of things. Some people
Yep.
maybe more privately, and others maybe even who have a history of being more private with their thoughts and their feelings, aching to get them off of their chest and have it be okay that whatever they're feeling is valid. And
Mhm.
just giving somebody that time and attention to say, I haven't figured this out either. I'm perhaps just as confused as you are about everything, and just as angry and scared, and some of the, let's have a discussion about it and start there. That meaningful connection again ends up being the foundation for the relationship to come. And if one of the things I like to say often is, you help enough other people get what they want, you will get what you want. So if anybody on this call is scared, well, am I going to get the job or am I going to get the business? I would counter that by saying, you help enough other people get what they need, you will get what you need, right? But there isn't always a quantifiable one-to-one relationship in terms of, if I do this, I will get this. Nor should that be our focus, right?
Right. 100% agree. And John made a comment. Thank you, John, for the kind words. I appreciate that and being on. I would take it a step further too, and say the biggest piece of this is being genuine, and being transparent and being vulnerable. Brandon Murphy, prior to COVID-19, always wanted to make sure I was very put together, had my stuff together. If you had a question, I needed to have an answer. I'm not like that. I'm a mess. To be very direct.
To be clear, you're in a mess in a button down in a sport coat, which I appreciate.
This is only for you. But just being transparent and genuine with people. That's another change and shift that this situation has caused me to make, and I'm so happy it did, because it's shocking how quickly when I share my missteps and my mistakes and my assumptions that were wrong, and I'm being transparent and open with somebody, that it quickly is reciprocated. There's a quick bond that's made there, and it's genuine. And that's another key factor into all this is be true to yourself and be true with other people about what your challenges are or what you're struggling with at the moment. And it's such a rewarding exchange at that point, where prior to that it was surface level. Like you said, hey, how you doing? I'm fine. Okay, how are you? Let's talk about my business. That's gone. No more of that. Yeah. So that's a great point.
Wonderful. I think that's a great point to leave it on. As you can imagine, it's a shame that we don't have so much more time. I'm intentional about limiting us to 30 minutes, and they go by so quickly. So I want to wrap up with a couple of things. First of all, Brandon, I want to thank you for your time, and I'll thank you a couple of times between now and when we hang up here. But just the fact that you would spend 30 minutes with us is so appreciated. Two things. One, people are gonna, first of all, you may have resources to share. So again, you're gonna send me those links. I'm gonna send them out to everybody who's attended today in an email, blind copying everyone. And so that you'll have an opportunity to follow up on some resources that maybe have been influential in terms of Brandon's own transition to being service-minded in the way that he is now in his company. Number two, people are going to want to follow up with you, I'm sure. How can they do so?
Great question. Sorry, my fault. Took it too quick of a cup there of coffee, or sip of coffee. LinkedIn is the best. I'll put my email in the chat as well. It's B Murphy, B for Brandon, and then my last name, MURPHY, at lucasjamestalent.com. And I think I missed the S in James. Yeah, okay.
Lucas James.
Lucas James, right. But please send me a message on LinkedIn, a note. Thrilled to connect. Same with my email, and would love to have a conversation and start a relationship when appropriate.
Great. And as you're doing with all other LinkedIn connections, make sure you personalize it to Brandon, letting him know how you know him.
Yes.
And give him some context, and do that for absolutely every other connection that you make. That is a point that I can't emphasize enough these days. Fantastic. People know how to get a hold of you. We are going to, at this point, for people who want to stick around, we're going to encourage people to unmute themselves to contribute. If you need to go about your afternoon, we will encourage that and support that as well. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I would love for you to return to harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates and see some of the upcoming conversations that are taking place. Thursday of this week, Kate Seworth from Launchways is going to talk with me about, guess what? Personal connection, being human, and what it's done for her personally and professionally in her business. And then I have some additional conversations coming up in the next week or two that I've just gotten on the calendar that I am so excited about, including Steve Brown, the vice president of HR for La Rosa's Pizzeria, based out of Ohio. Just a very public figure when it comes to human resources, and just so well connected himself, and really putting out some very positive messages these days. So I'd love for you to come back, and actually space is limited as they are for all of these, and space is actually filling up pretty quickly for Steve Brown's conversation. So if you want to be a part of that, you can register at harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates. If you need to take off, you're welcome to do so now. Go about your afternoon. Hopefully you feel more encouraged and inspired to do your best work and to connect meaningfully with others and to give first. If you want to stick around, you can unmute yourself at this point to participate in our conversation. But once again, Brandon, thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you again. Would love to do it again sometime in the future. This has been a lot of fun, Eric, as always.